The lonely rancher had only come to the station to collect supplies. But when the last train disappeared into the sunset, it left behind something no one expected. A young male order bride clutching a crying baby, abandoned by the man who had promised to marry her. As the townsfolk turned away, one quiet rancher stepped forward and simply said, "Come with me." What happened after that single act of kindness changed both of their lives forever, and the ending will leave you speechless. Stay with me until the very end to witness this unforgettable Wild West story. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming Wild West stories of courage, love, and second chances. The golden light of the setting sun stretched across the lonely railroad station as the steam engine let out one final whistle before disappearing beyond the hills. Dust settled over the wooden platform, and silence slowly replaced the noise of departing passengers. Standing alone beside two worn suitcases was 24-year-old Clara, a gentle mail order bride dressed in a faded blue frontier dress, holding a sleepy baby boy wrapped tightly in a blanket. She kept glancing toward the empty road, hoping every distant figure would become the man who had written her months of heartfelt letters. He had promised to meet her, marry her, and give her son a safe home. But as the last passengers disappeared, the painful truth became impossible to deny. He had never intended to come. Around her, whispers spread quickly. Some townsfolk shook their heads with pity, while others laughed quietly, calling her foolish for believing a stranger's promises. The station master offered a sympathetic look, but admitted there was nowhere for her to stay. Clara fought back tears. She had sold everything she owned to make this journey. She had nowhere to return and barely enough money left to buy bread for herself and her child. Still, she refused to beg. She hugged her son tighter, whispering softly that everything would somehow be all right, even though she no longer believed the words herself. Just then, a tall rancher stepped off a supply wagon parked nearby, his weathered hat shaded kind but tired eyes. His name was Ethan Brooks, a widowed rancher who had spent years living alone in the mountains after losing his wife to illness. He had come only to collect fencing supplies, but something about the lonely young mother standing abandoned on the platform caught his attention. Unlike everyone else, he noticed she wasn't asking anyone for help. She simply stood with quiet dignity, protecting her child from the evening wind. Ethan watched as people passed without stopping. His heart reminded him of the loneliness he had carried for years. Finally, he walked toward her. Clara instinctively stepped back, uncertain whether another stranger would mock her. Instead, Ethan removed his hat respectfully and spoke in a calm voice. "Mom, you'll freeze out here after dark." Clara lowered her eyes and answered softly that she would figure something out. Ethan looked at the frightened baby, then toward the dark mountains. He knew wolves often wandered near the station after sunset. Remaining silent for a long moment, he finally spoke the words that changed everything. "Come with me." Clara stared at him in disbelief. He wasn't smiling, wasn't making promises, and wasn't asking for anything in return. "I've got an empty cabin room," he continued. "You and the little one can stay until you decide your next step." The station fell silent. Several men exchanged surprised glances, already preparing fresh gossip about the lonely rancher bringing a stranger home. Ethan ignored every whisper. He simply picked up one of Clara's heavy suitcases and carried it toward his wagon. For the first time since arriving, hope flickered in Clara's heart. She climbed aboard, holding her baby close as the wagon rolled away from the station beneath the glowing western sky, carrying three lonely souls toward a future none of them could yet imagine. The journey to Ethan Brooks' ranch was quiet, except for the steady creak of the wagon wheels and the gentle breathing of Clara's sleeping baby. Neither of them spoke much. Ethan had spent years living in silence after losing his wife, and Clara had learned through hardship that trust should never be given too quickly. Yet there was something comforting about the silence between them. It carried no judgment, no false promises, and no pressure. When they finally reached the ranch, the evening sky had turned deep orange behind the mountains. A weathered log cabin stood beside a sturdy red barn, surrounded by grazing horses and wooden fences. It wasn't a grand place, but it was warm, clean, and peaceful. Ethan showed Clara a small spare room that had remained empty for years. "It isn't much," he said quietly, "but it's safe." Tears filled Clara's eyes as she looked around the simple room. After days of fear and uncertainty, safety felt like a gift beyond measure. She thanked him with a trembling voice and gently laid her son in the old wooden cradle Ethan had repaired long ago but never used again. That night, while Ethan prepared supper, Clara quietly swept the cabin floor, washed the dishes, and mended a torn curtain without being asked. She believed kindness should always be returned with honest work. Ethan noticed everything but said nothing. The next morning, Clara woke before sunrise. She cooked breakfast using the little food Ethan had left in the pantry and carefully packed his lunch before he headed out to repair broken fences. When Ethan returned that evening, he found the cabin cleaner than it had been in years. Fresh bread cooled on the table, the baby's laughter echoed through the room, and flowers from the nearby meadow rested in an old glass jar beside the window. For the first time since losing his wife, the cabin no longer felt empty. Days slowly turned into weeks. Clara helped feed the chickens, tended the vegetable garden, stitched worn clothes, and cared for the horses whenever she could. Her little boy quickly grew attached to Ethan, reaching for him every evening as the rancher returned home tired from work. At first, Ethan awkwardly held the child, unsure of himself. But before long, the little boy laughed whenever Ethan lifted him onto his shoulders to watch the sunset over the hills. The lonely rancher found himself smiling more often than he had in years. Not everyone approved. During a trip into town, gossip spread quickly. Some claimed Clara was taking advantage of Ethan's generosity. Others insisted the baby would only bring trouble. One afternoon, a wealthy ranch owner mocked Ethan in front of everyone at the general store. "You've turned your ranch into a shelter for strangers," he sneered. The room fell silent, waiting for Ethan's response. Ethan calmly looked at the man and answered, "A home isn't measured by who owns it. It's measured by who feels safe inside it." His words silenced the entire store. Clara, who had quietly overheard the exchange, felt tears gather in her eyes. No one had ever defended her with such dignity. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars appear above the mountains, Clara finally confessed the truth about the baby's father. He had died months before her journey, and the letters from the mail order groom had seemed like her only chance to give her son a better future. Ethan listened without interrupting. When she finished, he simply nodded and said, "You don't have to carry that burden alone anymore." For the first time in many years, two broken hearts began believing that perhaps God had not brought them together by accident, but for a reason far greater than either of them had ever imagined. Months passed, and the lonely ranch no longer echoed with silence. It was filled with laughter, tiny footsteps, and the comforting feeling of family. Clara transformed the once empty cabin into a warm home, while her little boy began calling Ethan Pa, without anyone teaching him. The simple word touched Ethan's heart more deeply than he could ever explain. One Sunday after church, Ethan stood before the entire frontier town beside Clara and gently took her hand. Looking into her tearful eyes, he said, "You came here believing no one wanted you. But if you'll have me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life protecting you and your son." Clara could barely speak through her tears as she whispered, "Yes." The townspeople who had once mocked them now stood in respectful silence. They had witnessed how kindness, honesty, and quiet sacrifice had built something stronger than gossip ever could. That evening, friends and neighbors gathered at the ranch for a simple celebration. Lanterns glowed beneath the stars, music filled the air, children laughed in the yard, and Clara's little boy ran happily into Ethan's waiting arms. In that unforgettable moment, Ethan realized that the greatest blessing of his life had arrived on a lonely train platform when he simply chose to say, "Come with me." Their story became a reminder throughout the frontier that real love is not found in perfect beginnings, but in compassionate hearts willing to offer someone a second chance. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still believes in kindness, hope, and the power of second chances. See you in the next heartfelt Wild West story.